Why I wanted to share my story was because my life was changed originally. How I found the personal growth stuff was just by somebody sharing their story. So we all have stories, and I think that it's important that we all share them, because at some point, somebody's going to hear that story and their life may change, and that's worth it, even if it's just one person.
Hey Channel Insiders, I'm your host Katie Bavoso, and welcome back for part 2 of my interview with Chief Experience Officer of VXIT, Paul Vedder. If you haven't watched or listened to part 1, you know what to do. Head on over to channelinsider.com right now to catch up. In this half of the interview, we discuss Paul's new book, which he published earlier this year. In it, he aims to help others be the best versions of themselves while navigating the IT managed services industry. Plus, he doesn't hold back when challenging some industry norms he wants to change. I'm going to shift gears a little bit so I can talk about you a little bit more, because you did something pretty exciting this year. You published a book. It's called Vision and Execution: Empowering Personal Growth and IT Excellence, which I did purchase with my own money. So this podcast is not sponsored by that book. So first of all, why don't we dig into a little bit about what's in the book? Because like I said, I've read it, paid for it. You get very personal. You use a lot of personal anecdotes from your own life to relate that to your job, to the industry as a whole, and to how you approach your work. Where did you see an opportunity to get a book like this out into the industry? Did you not see yourself in any of the ones that you were reading? And who exactly is this book designed to help?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, the process was interesting. And I hired a company. They helped me put the thing together. So I did have some help. I didn't lock myself in a log cabin, Stephen King style, and a typewriter and type this thing out. So I didn't do that. But it was a cool experience to do it. Won't be the last one I do.
Teaser.
And so I don't know when that'll happen, but definitely won't be the last one, because I'd always wanted to write a book. And that was what initially drove me. Secondly, and I have a copy right here that I'm looking at, but one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to simplify what we do, because a lot of the times it's hard to really have people understand what we do, especially within the sales process. People are businesses are especially if they don't have IT help, or if they're not paying a managed service provider, they're spending thousands of dollars a month to onboard an IT provider. And all they can see, or all they think of, it's just support. So they're paying us thousands of dollars so that, when my employees can't print or send an email, they have help. Now that's important, but that is just a small piece of what we do in managing a company's environment, their likelihood, because everything runs on technology. So I wanted to kind of boil some very high level topics so that people would understand. And let's be frank, IT is not sexy. It's just not sexy. Technology is not sexy.
I've been waiting for somebody to say it. Yeah.
Now, it's sexy to us nerds, and we find it sexy, but nobody else finds it sexy. So I needed to obviously tie in some personal stories, and I'm huge into personal development and the growth mindset. It's something that I found around 8 years ago, actually through the process of building the business. And why I wanted to share my story was because my life was changed originally. How I found the personal growth stuff was just by somebody sharing their story. So we all have stories, and I think that it's important that we all share them, because at some point, somebody's going to hear that story and their life may change, and that's worth it, even if it's just one person. And it was not just sharing their story, but with great transparency. And that's why I lean into the transparency thing. And I have no problem. I'm an open book. Let's talk about, whatever we want to talk about. We're all on this planet together. We're all going to die one day. We're all going to the same place. Nobody is better than anybody else, but we all have a story. Everybody has a story to tell. I wanted to tell mine. I wanted to get transparent, because that's how my life was changed. So that's basically why I did that.
Hoping to be able to reach that next person who needs to hear a story that'll change their life, essentially. For you, yeah. What is your biggest takeaway that you hope people get from the book then? Do you want them to have that moment of saying, I can change, I can be different, I can be happier, I can be more put together, healthier, whatever? Or is there something that you're hoping that the majority of people take away when they read it? I
mean, the reality is, and I'll just be frank, the book is a sales tool. Most MSP owners write books like this, but I wanted mine to be a little different. That's why I threw that personal growth stuff in there as well, because I didn't want it to be boring. I didn't want it to just be about IT. So I had to boil the IT concepts down, and then I threw in the personal growth stuff. So I wanted also the personal growth stuff for people, friends like you, who I knew somebody would read it. So I wanted to throw that personal growth stuff for the people within our industry. obviously like an MSP owner, an IT person reading the concepts in that book are not helpful. So that was for the, prospects and people that don't understand what an MSP does. That's kind of evangelizing that message to them. And whether they go with us or not, I want them to look at our industry and go, this is important and it's worth the investment. Like I said, whether they work with VXIT or another MSP, it doesn't matter. And I also wanted to help save business owners from MSPs, because there's a lot of the MSPs out there, in my opinion. And I want to help protect them, and I want to raise the standard again for our industry. That's kind of what I'm looking to do and hope to do, and do it together. I'm not doing this because I think I'm better than anyone in any way, shape, or form. That is not what I'm saying. But we do this all together. And again, that's why I think it's important that we share our stories.
And that brings me to thinking about some of that personal stuff, as you put it inside the book, where you really like to talk about designing your life and taking back that control. I mean, you're no stranger to this. You're very intentional when it comes to saying, like, I'm going to get up at the time I designate. I'm going to cold plunge. I'm going to make Katie feel bad about it. And then I'm going to take a sauna. So for you, I mean, how has that allowed you, since you started that journey, like you said, 8 years ago, how has that allowed you to become a better leader, in your opinion?
It's because I'm putting in the work that's required to live the life that I want. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Like, I'm doing the work. I'm not sitting on some throne somewhere going, do my bidding. That's not how I run my organization. Again, our success is found in little things that happen throughout the day. I heard this on a podcast the other day, like it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. Like you see the Rocky cutscene where, it's 30 seconds of him running and, preparing for this fight. But the reality is that wasn't 30 seconds. That was 10, 20 years. And back to what you said kind of about the conference thing. Before I found the personal development stuff, I wasn't happy with my life. And I just felt like I was on this carousel. Like, I'm like, this is life. Like, this is it. Like, I was kind of disillusioned by it. And then I realized that I had the power to change the things that I didn't like about my life. And it sounds like such a stupid thing to say out loud, kind of, because you're like, well, duh, of course you have the power. But most people don't realize the amount of work it takes to change the things that you want changed. We sit and we wallow in those things. And again, I'm not where I want to be fitness wise. I'm not where I want to be financially, my relationship with my wife, my kids. I'm not perfect, but I get up most days. I kind of use the EOS mantra of like, you're never going to get 100%. So anything above 80% is good. And that's kind of how they look at success. Because if you're shooting for 100 and you land between 80 and 100, like most people won't do that. Mm-hmm. So if 80% of my week is structured, again, nutrition, working out, all of that stuff, if I'm following that plan and putting in that work, like I know that I'm going to have success over time. And it's going to just take me putting in the work and the reps and continuing to do what I want to do to craft the life that I want.
You've been obviously very vocal during this interview itself, just in the 20, 30-ish minutes that we've been talking. So I'd like to know, you're outspoken in the industry. And whenever I see Paul on LinkedIn or hear Paul on a podcast like this one, I think people know what they're getting with you because you're very transparent. How have you applied that to letting the industry know? And when I say the industry, I guess the vendors know that you're a voice that should be listened to because you do represent the viewpoints of so many people. I mean, how does that outspokenness kind of come into play when you're trying to better the industry as a whole?
Like I said earlier, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything. And I'm never, ever the smartest one in the room. And I'm okay with that. So the one thing that I'm willing to do that some people aren't, I've made it a habit because I wasn't like this, but it's asking the questions that everyone's thinking and just getting it out there. And let's have a conversation about that because everybody's wondering it, but nobody's going to speak up. So I've conditioned myself to be brave in that manner, to ask the questions that most people are thinking. And, the second I start to ask those questions, everybody jumps in and they're like, yes, they get on board with that. So that's how I'm leading right now, is just by asking those questions. And, and sometimes it might not be a question. Sometimes it's an opinion about something. And it lends itself more towards questions than anything, because I don't want to walk around talking because that's not constructive either. It's just asking the right questions and then collaborating as human beings.
Is there a question that you've asked lately that you can give an example of that for?
One of the things that popped up recently that comes to mind is like ConnectWise. They're like a necessary evil in my life. I've been using their PSA since 2009 when I first started in this industry. That PSA needs help. But it's the behemoth, it's the kind of one of the gold standards of our industry. It's a good system. It looks like it was built by nerds and it's not been refreshed since 2009, and they need to stop. They need to fix that. But when we talk about it, they're like, yeah, we hear you, but here's a new RMM. And we're like, we don't want that. We want you to fix the PSA. Like, so anyway, that's like a good example of questions and comments and things that I think that came up like last week when I was talking with somebody. And it's frustrating because the vendors they're big sales engines, like they're sales machines, and they're outpacing our ability to sell back to our clients. And all they're doing is taking our margins down. And our margins are not that high to begin with in our industry. Best in class, I think, is 15 to 20%, something like that. And we're not even, we're barely there, and especially over the last couple of years because of, what happened with COVID and employment and wages and inflation and all that stuff. Like, it piles on and it piles on. And when I've got a vendor calling me, trying to upsell me on things that I may or may not need, it kind of drives me nuts.
Is there anything they could take away right now? Pretend they had no idea of what they were doing or what their actions were leading to. What would you say to the vendors at large that serve the channel, that partner with you, what they can do to just be a better partner in this situation? One
of the things that I've loved, so like Enable's really good at this. So when I go to like a channel company event, we have like the boardrooms. Enable will come into a boardroom and they'll help us work on a business problem. Dave Weeks does this really, really good. Or anybody. I think a few people have done this from Enable, but they'll come in and they'll talk about something completely unrelated to a product that they're actually selling. And they'll be like, oh, and by the way, we also sell a backup tool. So it was like, they kind of took a roundabout, and they're still trying to sell us something at the end of the day. Let's not get that twisted, and that's totally fine. But they're also adding value by helping us solve like a business operational problem. So I think that there's value in that. When we're able to benchmark against peers and things like that, that's super helpful. Being able to collaborate. Whenever we go to these conferences, we always say that the biggest value is when we get around as business owners or, employees and talk about the problems that we're facing on a day-to-day basis. It's not the boardrooms. It's not the vendor presentations. This industry is like, there's so many conferences. And I've joked around with people that I was going to make one more conference, but I was going to call it Anti-Con. And it was going to be the exact opposite of every conference that exists right now. We could sleep in, the first meal is brunch. It's going to be a lot of collaboration time. We don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Oh, and there'd be no more vendor pitches. And like, vendors could show up, MSPs could show up. We'd all do things together. Like, we're not eating separately. We're all doing things together, and no more pitches, no more sales pitches. So I don't know. It would be the exact opposite of every conference out there.
I want to go. Like. Well, I will definitely register. You mentioned Enable there, but are there any other vendors that are actually doing right by you right now that you would shout out in addition to Enable?
I'm a huge fan of PAX8. And to be frank, I'm on the advisory council for PAX8 and Enable. One of the interesting problems with business in general is when PE gets involved. It all goes back to money. Money causes problems. It's also a solution to many problems, but it does cause problems because the second that PE steps in, they start to squeeze everything. And that doesn't end well for most people. It ends well for them because they get paid. But that's something that's tough on us, honestly, is the PE industry. Just trying to squeeze whatever margin they can out of something that started probably out of a grassroots movement, something that was trying to solve a problem originally. It's like going back to Google. When they first started, they're like, don't be evil. They're now evil. So it's like they've become the thing that they didn't want to become. Yeah, I think that's tough for us sometimes. But, PAX8, great people over there. And I'm always rooting for Enable. Their backup products are awesome. We love their backup products. And we've been on different versions of their RMM because we were back in the Max Focus and days before they acquired them.
As far as advice that you would give to end user business owners, because we talked a little bit about that. You talk about how when PE sort of squeezes everything, the message gets lost. And I can imagine that would impact the end users the hardest in this situation. What do you want end user business owners to know as we move into 2025? What should they be looking for when they're going out to get an MSP, to have that third party managed service provider involved in their IT? Is there anything they should keep in mind and look for?
I think one of the things that stands out is that they need to partner with an MSP that's willing to protect themselves even from the MSP themselves. Like, the MSP always needs to do what's in the best interest of that business. And again, because these business owners hand us the keys to the kingdom, their livelihood. Like, we miss on a backup or we take down a critical thing. They have employees. It's literally costing money when they're down. So protecting them at all cost, like I said, even from the MSP themselves. That's why, we don't lock anybody into contracts. If you don't want to be in a relationship with us, you can leave at any time. I think we require 60 days as far as our contracts are concerned, because it usually takes a little time to unwind everything. But we're not going to hold anybody into a relationship that they don't want to be in. And again, I'm willing to do whatever possible to, help protect businesses and business owners and help them thrive. Our motives are aligned too, because when they grow, we grow. So I want our clients to grow.
And when it comes to tech trends these days, I feel like we're in a prime example of a year where people are just throwing AI at things and seeing like, oh, is that going to make any measurable difference, even if it's just cool looking? Are there any tech trends, whether it be AI or not, that you're following, implementing, or absolutely avoiding right now, and why?
I'm not going to any extremes on either one of them. I'm keeping an eye on all of the things. Obviously, AI is the hot thing right now, but cryptocurrency was the hot thing, and it's not. It's always a thing that's just a distraction. Now, AI is great. I use it every day. Is it coming to save us? No. That's like one of my favorite sayings. I learned this early on in our business. My business partner and I were doing an offsite planning session for that coming year. And we had at the time, basically our outsourced CFO, our CPA guy, he showed up and I was like, hey, this is what we're thinking. Help us kind of map this out. And he sat with us for an hour. There was not really a lot of value in the meeting. And when he left, I went up to the whiteboard and I just wrote across all the stuff that we had. I was like, no one is coming to save us. And I realized that it was up to me to get myself where I wanted to be. Like, nobody cares about my business as much as me. As much as I'd like to say, I'd love for my employees to care as much. Like, they're not. It's not their business. And my business partner, he's good and is focused on certain things. I'm good and focused on other things. And that's actually why we make great partners, because we're good at different things. But no one's coming to save you. Again, it goes back to that work that you have to put in to craft the life, the business, whatever it is that you want. Like, you have to put in the work. And you have to write the goals, the objectives, and understand the little tasks that are going to get you to being able to fulfill those goals.
If you had one blanket piece of advice for anyone listening to this or watching this video, whether they be in the channel or not, as we're in Q4 now, we're staring down the barrel of 2025. What do you think people should be doing to improve their lives going into this new year?
Just find whatever you need to find to win the day. Because your success next year is going to be made up, like I said, of you winning as many days as humanly possible. And I have that tattooed on my arm, win the day. Like, it's a constant reminder. And the A in day, for those of video, you can see it, but for those on audio, you can't. The A is a spade, and a spade is a shovel, and it means work. Like, you have to put in the work on a daily basis to win the day, so that you can win the week, so that you can win the month, so that you can win the quarter, so that you can win the year. And you can look back and go, okay, I did it. Was it perfect? No. And tracking those metrics along the way. Again, we have a rule at VXIT where we're not allowed to say, oh, we have a process for that, unless we actually have a written process. Like, if you say, oh, we have a process for that, I'm like, show me that process document. Show it to me. Because if you say that we have a process for that and it's not written down, like, we don't have a process. It goes back to the old saying, if it wasn't in ConnectWise, it didn't happen. Like, that was one of their things that they used to say all the time. And we say that still. Tracking the metrics, if you're trying to lose weight, okay, set a goal. I want to lose 20 pounds next year. Great. Reverse engineer that. What does that look like? Lose 4 pounds or once a quarter, or however it is. Just, you always have to reverse back and just do the math, because it's simple. Like, life is very simple. It doesn't mean it's easy. Life is very hard, but it is very simple. So I think that that's a good reminder too.
I love that. Some really, really good advice. And I know it's a big deal coming from you, Paul. So thank you so much for just taking the time to share that with me today and for being here. And I just want to know if we want to get in touch with you, whether it be about how to get your book, or we want some lifestyle design advice, or we just want to figure out how we can get the best from VXIT. Where can we go?
If you want to learn more about VXIT, you can go to VXIT.com. If you want, you can look me up on LinkedIn. I do post there and talk with people there. I'm also on Instagram. That's the only other social platform that I'm on. So my username is Paul Vedder Jr. So PaulVedderJr. And I will post things there from time to time.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much. I'm still not going to cold plunge, but I am much more motivated to learn more about it after talking to you. But thank you so much for taking the time today.
Of course.
Thanks again to Paul for joining me, and thank you for watching or listening. You can check out all episodes of Channel Insider Partner POV on channelinsider.com or at youtube.com/channelinsider_news and trends. You can also listen to this episode and every episode as a podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow to never miss an episode. Once again, I'm Katie Bavoso, and I'll see you next time.